All right, I dropped the young man off, so now I'm back at it. We're going to go ahead and finish hollowing out the torso for right now of the second Sista of Three Sisters, One Fro, second installment. The earlier video, we had covered hollowing out all of this, left this part of the arms because there's still a lot of forming to get the exact shape I want, and I don't want to have a hollowed in area so that when I start shaving off, I've made areas too thin that will be susceptible to breakage. So this is the torso that I removed. The arms are very flimsy, flexible, and that's fine because we're really more so working on this part. So I'm going to lift it up a little bit so that you can see me make the markings. Coming down around here because that's a ledge that it joins to. I'm making this a little wider because these areas on the outer edges right here, here, are very thin. So I don't want to pull it in more because when I dig, it's just going to make that too thin. Starting off with this tool once again, and you know the flip side is the more triangular shape. Sorry that it's so dirty. Again, I have a tendency to let clay dry on my tools and then I just pluck it off when I'm ready to use it. So we're going to go ahead and go in here fairly lightly. And I don't need to walk you through this part, so you're just going to watch while I hush now. Okay, so now I'm moving this off to the side for just a moment because I am going to rejoin the torso to this part. But first I have to take my tools off of the plate that covers my slip. I'm setting that off to the side. You can see it right there. I didn't have to move the tools. All I had to do was lift the plate. But I don't have a whole lot of common sense. So I normally do things the difficult way, whereas other people would have immediately known that, okay, just lift the plate up with the tools on it. But I don't know, my brain just functions mad different. So I took all the tools off, took the plate off, and then put the tools back on. Dumb. Anyway, so here is the slip that you might remember from the previous video. I added the clay to it, the clay particles. I put that in the bowl, and then I also added the water, and I've let it sit for like a day, waiting for it to become the consistency that I need. That tool dropped. If you saw my head, that was me picking it up. So this is the tool that you probably have become familiar with now at this point because I love using it. It's not much to look at, but it serves its purpose. This top right here has a very shallow, very slight concave, and that works good for pressing in areas, for working over the curve of like a shoulder, like that, and being able to press it into place without it flattening it. So all I'm doing right now is using this palette knife to scrape the dry clay residue off of this tool. Let me move the plate out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. That's it. And that's because I'm junky. I'm sure there are a lot of other sculptors who are much neater with their process, and that's cool, but I'm just trifling that way. And we will live with that. We will deal. So the first thing I'm going to do is scrape off the sides of this bowl. I have to put it down because I just want that dropped into the pool of slip more than it is now. Right now it's too much along the sides. So it's just me scraping so that I can get everything together before I start stirring the slip. I sprayed some water in there. You probably noticed that. That's so it can start softening up while I'm doing all of this. All right, so now I'm just taking that same tool, sort of mixing the slip. I normally have it a thinner consistency than this, but I want to start working with a much thicker consistency because I feel like it's going to make the difference in the bonds. I haven't had a lot of problems very many at all with the bonds that I create using the thinner slip, but I don't know, just something is telling me, no, make it thicker because it's going to serve you well and serve you better as you go along. So that's what I'm doing. So now you see the consistency of this slip. I can hold it like this and you see it's not moving. It is very thick. And normally the consistency that I have it at, if I had tilted the bowl like that, the majority of it would have ended up on the table. But I'm doing things differently this now. Wow. I'm doing things differently this time. All right, I don't know. My tongue keeps wrapping around my teeth and deciding it's just not going to cooperate. But I'm doing this differently this time, and we'll just have to see how it works out. And I don't think it's going to be a problem, because too much slip is always better than having not enough. So putting the plate off to the side with the tools, pushing the slip bowl out of the way so I can bring this back. Now, if you guys have been following along with the rest of the videos, you know what the deal is now. I'm going to use my serrated edge tool, which I'm cleaning off right now, and that's out of camera range because that's not important for you to see. But this is the tool that I just slightly cleaned off. It has little knife-like edges, and that's what I use to create, through cross-hatching, the technique of going this way, that way, up, down, creating texture so that when I put the slip on it, and then affix the piece that was removed to this, it has something to really latch onto. And the idea is that you want the clay to go like this instead of like this. Because when you have that, it's going to give a stronger foundation. And when you start reworking the clay again in areas, you're not concerned about if there is enough grip between the two pieces to allow you to go ahead and work as you normally would, without wondering if you're knocking things loose, if you're affecting the alignment, any of that. So I'll probably zoom in on this part when I edit the video to show you just how textured it is, but I'm not going to do that right this second. And now the next step is to go and serrate the part that I cut off that's going to be affixed. Same deal, cross-hatching, back and forth, up and down, on everything that is going to connect, to give it that texture, so that once I put the slip on, again, it has something to solidly commingle with and grip onto. This arm is very flimsy, so I'm slowing down so that I can apply pressure without ripping it away from itself. And using my hand to brace that area. And you'll notice it doesn't get serrated in here because that's the hollowed out part. This area is what's being connected. So I'm putting this part of her down for now, returning back to this part, and the same tool that I told you I love with the shallow spoon, and that was used to mix up the slip, is now going to be used, trying to get this into a range that's good for you guys. This is now going to be used to dip in, and I put the slip on the back of it, on the outside of the concave. And I start tapping it into place. I'm not rubbing because the goal is, for me, is not to disturb the texture that I just created and accidentally flatten it. So I just pat all around, making sure that every area of those serrated parts have a very, very generous amount of slip on them. As you know, if you've been watching the other videos, when I press these pieces together, that slip is going to slide out of the inner and outer seams. And that's not a problem. That's what you want. Because the more slip that slides out, the more visual evidence you have that you are making your connection tight, that you are pressing the pieces together firmly enough. Because if you're not, and you just put a piece up against this, but you don't make sure to press inward, you're not going to see any slip come out of the outer and inner seams. There's no reason for it to. You haven't applied enough pressure to make it need to move. And I'm pretty sure that that's going to be a death knell for how solid the connection is, and that you're probably going to leave it vulnerable to some cracking or possibly even explosion once it does go into the kiln. And we never want that. We never want to do anything where it's obvious that you're going to be worried the entire time your sculpture is inside of the kiln. You need to let those explosions and those cracks be an absolute surprise, because as far as you're concerned, you did everything in your power to avoid them. Not rushing, not thinking, oh, I don't have time to really make this slip the consistency I want, or I'm just going to put it on some parts but not here. It is going to keep you up and worried the whole time that your piece is in the kiln, and you'll basically have no one to blame but yourself because, you know, you thought about it, you considered it, you knew there might be a problem, but you decided to rush through. And I hope I don't sound all preachy, but I'm telling you things that I'm learning as I develop patience, which sculpture is definitely teaching me because I have none. I have zero patience. I'm used to illustration and thinking up something, and when necessary, having to grab at some reference photos to know what direction I'm going. And then I illustrate pretty fast. I illustrate pencil to paper quickly. I illustrate digitally quickly. And I'm used to seeing the fruits of my labor come together crazy fast. And that does not always happen with sculpture. And then it teaches you to slow down, think about what you're doing, and get yourself to a level of work technique so that when this baby goes into the kiln, you're not thinking about all the things you should have done, because everything that you should have and could have done, you implemented. So the hope is that you're going to get rewarded for that patience, for that diligence, by having a piece that comes out of the kiln safely. All right, so now I'm just wiping off that tool on the edge of the bowl, picking it up for a second, just to clean off those edges again. Probably an exercise in futility because it's just, you know, you just keep messing up the same areas. But sometimes it just becomes so unsightly that you can't take looking at it anymore, and sometimes that happens to me. All right, I'm done obsessing over that. Putting it off to the side, putting the plate on top of it. And now it is time to grab up this piece and affix it. But first, I'm going to spritz this just once or twice. Boom, boom. Liquefy it a little more. And here we go. I'm going to hold her by her boobs because that's the best place to grip her right now. I'm laying that against it. Right now, I'm just gently putting the areas into position because sometimes when you're hollowing, you've pressed on the clay and it's altered the form just a little bit, but that's not a big deal because you're going to press all of this together and get it right back. So I'm going to spin this around so you can see what I've done. I've basically just put these pieces into place. I haven't applied any real pressure yet. I just want to make sure that I have it aligned so that when I do start applying the pressure, I'm applying it in the right places and that it comes out the way I need it to come out. All right, so that is her right now. And some areas of slip have come out, but it's nothing compared to what's about to go down. I'm going to take a towel and just wipe off this tool because it's too grungy to work with for what I'm about to do. I need this clean. So there it is, nice and cleaned off. So now that I know that the pieces are in place, they're aligned pretty well, I'm first going to take this and I'm going to use the shallow concave just to wipe away the excess slip that is already there. I know you heard me stumble on that word, and that's because the longer I talk, at some point, for some reason, I suddenly become painfully aware of my L-I-S-P, and then every word with that letter, the crooked one in it, becomes a challenge. So I've taken this, and I've wiped off the extra. I'm going to switch it up to that word, because when I start pressing, I just want to see where the slip is coming out. The crooked letter word again. All right. Pulling this closer to the camera. Bear with me while I move the tripod just a bit. All right, so now the pressing starts. So I'm going to start with hand manipulation first. Pushing the seams together. Pushing all of these seams together, all the way around. And you can see where some of the slip came out. I'm just taking the tool to scoop that away, dropping that extra off on the edge of the table. Scooping some of that away. You'll get a chance to see during this process any very noticeable gaps. And you just take your time to fix that right there on the spot. Scrape it off. Press those areas into place. I have to get in on this inside part. And I also am using this tool on an inner area of her torso that's not readily visible to you at this angle, but I can see it. Now I'm taking and pressing this down into the belly. You see the slip? Yep, it's escaping because I'm aligning those pieces, pressing it down, and trying to ensure that I have a really great connection there. Here, you'll see I'm not removing the slip. I'm using it to blend. Pushing down on the bottom a little bit. using the excess slip to align that area and keep it nice and neat. So that the seams are firmly pressed together and I don't see a visual, very visual area of vulnerability. All right, now I'm coming over to the other side. And once again, at the angle that you are, you probably can't see this, but there is an open seam that I'm working with, and just smoothing it out, going along the seam of that inner arm, pressing and smoothing. Pressing in and smoothing down. Now we're along the outside, which hopefully you can see okay. It's not beautifully aligned, so I'm taking my hand, pressing that forward, pressing this part in a little, taking the tool while I compress both sides of the seam, and working the clay up and into the seam. See how I left that huge chunk of excess? Because I want to press that in and pat it down and smooth it out. Close up that seam line. Same thing here. I want that excess because I'm going to use it right there to pat in and press down. That's the excess that I wiped off on the side of the table because I see an indentation that's going to only become more pronounced as this dries. So I'm adding a heap of soft clay here to make sure that does not happen. And no need to finesse it within an inch of its life because there's still too much handling that has to happen for you to get into detail right now. Right now, my focus is making sure that areas where I can clearly see where I sliced are no longer evident. Now, this may not be evident to you, or it may be as I turn this slowly. There is a line right across her belly where that cut came from. I'm going to go ahead and work on other areas, making sure that they're good to go. And then that excess, I'm going to rub off on the area where I see the line. That's what I just did. That's the excess right there. So working on making sure this area is joined. I'm pressing up and in, getting rid of that seam, wiping the excess off onto the corner of the table. And once again, putting it right there so that I can come back to it in just a moment and get rid of that seam. Pressing in, working up. I'm pressing in, working up. Closing up the seam, making sure everything is pretty uniform. Same thing. Different techniques and different approaches for different areas. You see here I'm sort of flicking because I am trying to manipulate that seam closed, and I want it to happen sort of fast so that I'm not pressing this arm forward too much and distorting the look that it needs to have once it's all said and done. Same thing, going around, correcting those seams where the split happened so that I could hollow, getting back on this inside, pressing inward, flicking outward, pressing inward, flicking outward, making sure those seams are closed, wiping off the excess. All right. I think I've closed up everything pretty well. Some area in here that could use a little more work, and I'm just using the back of the tool to flatten that out. Same thing here. Needs to be a little more open, so I'm just working the tool in, and that's doing what it's supposed to. It's flattening actually on both sides. The inner side here of her torso, and it's rubbing against the interior of her arm. I flipped the tool so that I could get a different result, and I'm collecting some excess on the very back end that I'm sort of pushing through and grabbing with my hand. Same thing. All right, so now here's the belly area where I dropped off excess clay, and I'm going to drop off a little more because I still have just enough left on the edge of this platform. I'm hitting that with the spray bottle once. It does not need to be sopping wet. It just needs to be workable. I'm patting first, patting, P-A-T-T-I-N-G, patting, pressing in, because I want that clay to stay right there in that general area. Now it's an invisible line because you can't see it at all, but we remember where it was. And now I'm going to take the excess that's above that invisible line and just smooth it upward, collecting the excess on the side of my platform there. And now, same maneuver, different direction. Scraping down, downward. And again, no need to finesse this to within an inch of its life. You just want to make sure that that cut you created is not vulnerable, that everything is aligned. And I think we've done real good. I'm going to switch to another tool real quick. This one. 2 ends. Comes to a point, comes to a larger point. That's good for those areas like that. Now, if you're looking closely, just above where the tip is, you see a shadow. That shadow is clay, and I need to get that out of there. So I might have to approach it from a different angle. I'll go in here and pull down. You see that shadow's no longer there? This tool is also great for getting in those tight spaces like this. There's a seam on the inside of that arm, and I can take and just work the clay, come around with this, and smooth everything out to my liking. I just dipped my hand into the excess clay, and it felt yucky. All right, I'm going to stop here now, guys, because I want to take a quick little break, and it might be time for my groceries to be delivered. And Sister Gal hasn't had a serious salad since day before yesterday. Yesterday, I was pigging out on meat and cooked green beans. I had smoked pork neck bones. Yes, pork, you heard me. Pork, P-O-R-K, in my neck bones, because that's how in my greens, because that's how I like it. But I had like mad meat and no fresh raw vegetables. So today is going to be only salad, spring mix, eggs, banana peppers, olives, cucumbers, mini peppers, sunflower seeds. Hopefully they have my chow mein crunchy noodles that I like to top it off with, because those bricks, them croutons, that's not it. That is not it. Get yourself some choy chow mein noodles and everything will be all right with your salad. So once I get a little fortification and some sustenance, and quite possibly, knowing me, a nap, I'll be back later and we'll continue working on 3 Sisters, 1 Fro, the second installment in this series. And we are going to cut the junk in the trunk. We're going to slice right into that and start hollowing it out. And also we're going to slice into the side areas of her thigh, the outside of her thigh, hollow that out, and the same for this area. And in the meantime, to keep everything workable, what I normally do is take a spray bottle, I sort of spin this around, spray everywhere, keeps it pliable. I'm going to add extra to this part because at some point I'm going to be hollowing in that area. So I want to keep that area very, very pliable. So all I'm doing is spinning this around. This is just a regular old garbage bag. I am sliding it over the platform, watching that foot gently right there because that hangs off of the edge. Covering it up, you just sort of tuck it under. I always move it this way so I don't bump into it. You can't see, but the pile of clay, moistened clay that I like to keep is here on the side. I'm spraying that too. And we're done for now. I'll catch you later, and thank you for hanging out with me.